My name is Emily. And the night my family finally said out loud what they had been showing me for years, I was standing in our front hallway with my back against the door. My brother was in my face, finger jabbing at my chest as he yelled, "No one wants you here." Before I could even process the sting of those words, I heard it, clapping.
My mom.
She was actually applauding him like he had just won an argument instead of shoving her own daughter toward the street. My dad stood off to the side, silent, eyes down, pretending he wasn't really there. In that moment, something in me just switched off. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg them to take it back. I just looked at all three of them, memorized how proud they looked to finally push out the family disappointment, and said, "Okay." Then I turned around, walked upstairs to my room, and started packing jeans, a few t-shirts, my work shoes from the coffee shop, the laptop I bought with my own money, whatever cash I had hidden in an old mug. Every zipper closing felt like another thread between us snapping. I could hear them downstairs still talking about me like I was already gone. And for the first time, I realized maybe that was exactly what I needed to be. I left without slamming the door, without saying goodbye. And if you think that was dramatic, wait until you hear what happened the very next morning when my phone lit up with 36 missed calls from the same people who swore nobody wanted me there. If you want to know how I went from unwanted to holding all the power, stay with me until the end. People always say family is supposed to be your safe place. But for as long as I can remember, home felt more like a stage where I was the extra in someone else's show. I grew up in a perfectly normal-looking house in the suburbs outside Chicago, the kind of neighborhood with trimmed lawns, mailboxes decorated for the holidays, and neighbors who waved like everything behind closed doors was just as neat. Inside, though, there was a very clear rule that nobody ever said out loud. My brother mattered more. His name is Jake. He is the golden boy in every story my parents tell. My mom Karen talks about him like he is the main character in a movie she directed herself. My dad Mark doesn't say much, but when he does, it is usually to back her up. They love saying they treat us equally, but the reality has never even been close. I'm 19. I work at a coffee shop near campus, and every paycheck I get goes into a savings account for my graphic design classes. I pick up extra shifts when someone calls out, walk home smelling like espresso and sugar, and still somehow find the energy to cook dinner or clean up the kitchen because my mom says she's too tired after work, and Jake needs time to focus. Focus on what exactly has always been a mystery to me. He's 22, dropped out of community college after one semester, and spends most of his time in his room yelling into a headset at strangers online. Somehow, in my mom's mind, that still qualifies as potential. When Jake wanted a new gaming console and a curved monitor to go with it, my parents pulled out a credit card and made it happen. When I asked if they could help pay for a software license I needed for school, they laughed and told me I should learn to be independent. At dinner, every conversation circles back to him, his games, his online friends, his stress. If I mention a good grade, a new design I'm proud of, or how exhausted I am after a double shift, someone glances at their phone and changes the subject. Eventually, I stopped trying to join in and started just clearing plates, refilling water, stacking dishes like some kind of unpaid housekeeper who happens to live there. The funny thing is, it wasn't always explosive or dramatic. It was 1,000 small choices, 1,000 tiny cuts. Mom calling Jake my baby, while reminding me I was old enough to pull my own weight. Dad telling me I was strong and could handle things on my own, then turning around and stepping in whenever Jake messed up. The first time Jake borrowed money from the jar in my drawer to buy skins in one of his games, my parents called it a misunderstanding. They told me not to make it a big deal, that it was just siblings, and promised he would pay me back. He never did. I learned quickly that in this house I was expected to be understanding, forgiving, and quiet, while he got to be reckless, loud, and offended. I told myself that if I just worked hard enough, I could buy my own way out of there, that once I finished my classes and got a real job, I would hardly ever have to be home. That thought got me through a lot of late nights wiping tables and scrubbing coffee machines. The night my brother shoved me toward the door and my mom applauded him was not some random outburst. It was the moment all those little injustices finally piled up high enough to crush whatever was left of my hope that things might change. And the worst part is, if you had walked into our kitchen just a few hours before that, you would have thought it was just another normal evening in a normal family with no idea how close everything was to exploding. That night started like any other after a long shift at the coffee shop. I came home tired, clutching my tips, and thinking about the project I needed to finish on my laptop for class. I had no idea that walking through that front door would be the last time I entered that house as someone who actually lived there. By the time I pulled into the driveway that night, my feet were aching and my brain felt like it had been blended with coffee grounds. The only thing keeping me upright was the thought of getting upstairs, opening my laptop, and polishing the last details on a design I had been working on for days. It was for a small scholarship competition, nothing huge, but to me, that money meant one more class I wouldn't have to stress about. I pushed the front door open, and the first thing I noticed was the sound. Not the TV, not my parents talking. It was Jake's voice, loud and hyped, echoing down the hall from the living room. When I walked in, my stomach sank. He was sprawled on the couch, headset on, yelling into his mic, fingers flying over the keyboard of my laptop. Not his, mine. The one I had bought after months of saving tips and skipping lunches. For a second, I just stood there frozen. "What are you doing?" I finally asked, trying to keep my voice even. He barely flicked his eyes toward me. "Relax. I'm just using it for a bit," he said, then turned back to the game. The screen was flashing with some kind of online match, windows open that definitely were not my design software. The folder with my project was still on the desktop. But when I clicked away from his game for a second, my files were a mess. One main file I had carefully labeled was corrupted, the preview icon just a blank gray square. My heart dropped into my shoes. "Jake, what did you do?" I said, sharper this time. I tried to close his game. He snapped the laptop back toward himself and shoved my hand away.
"Can you not?" he snapped.
"You're messing up my match." I stared at him. "You're playing on my laptop without asking, and you've just trashed my project. I have a deadline tomorrow." He rolled his eyes so hard it was almost theatrical. "It's just some drawing thing. You can redo it. Don't be so dramatic." My hands were shaking. That drawing thing was hours of my life after every shift, pixels and lines that I actually felt proud of. "You've already taken money from me, and now you're taking my work, too," I said, my voice rising. "You don't get to just help yourself to my stuff because Mom thinks you're made of glass." The second I mentioned the money, his face changed. He ripped off one side of his headset and glared at me. "Oh my God. Are you still on that?" he shouted. "You lent me cash. Get over it. You always act like you're some martyr." "You stole it," I shot back, out of my drawer. "And you never paid me back. That is not lending." He stood up so fast the laptop slid on the coffee table. He stepped into my space, chest puffed up, voice getting louder. Through his headset, I could hear some guy laughing and asking what was going on. "You're just jealous because Mom and Dad actually appreciate me," he sneered. "You think working at some stupid coffee shop and drawing cartoons makes you better than me?" "I think working at all makes me more responsible than you," I replied. "All you do is shout at a screen and dig the family deeper into debt." That was when the front door opened again. My mom and dad walked in, arms full of grocery bags, mid-conversation. They saw us facing off and instantly, instinctively, my mom rushed to Jake's side like he was the one under attack. "What is going on here?" she demanded, looking at me. "Not him." Jake didn't miss a beat. "She's freaking out over her little art files and trying to shut off my game," he said, jabbing a thumb in my direction. "I was just borrowing the laptop." "Borrowing?" I repeated. "You corrupted my project. I've been working on it for a scholarship." I turned to my parents. "I bought that laptop with my own money. He has his own computer upstairs. Why is he even on mine?" My mom sighed like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum in a supermarket. "It's just a laptop, Emily. You two need to learn to share. Your brother had a tournament tonight. Can you not make everything about you for once?" My dad nodded slowly, already taking her side by habit. "If the file is gone, you can redo it. You're talented. You'll figure it out," he said, as if that was some kind of compliment. I felt my throat close. "It's not just the file," I said quietly. "It's everything. The money, the time, the way he walks all over me, and you always act like I'm the problem when I say anything. Jake gave a short, ugly laugh. Because you're the problem, he snapped. You're always whining. You're always playing victim. He stepped even closer, and I could feel his breath on my face now. You know what? If you hate it here so much, why don't you just leave? My mom didn't tell him to stop. She didn't tell him he was going too far. She folded her arms, watching me like she was waiting to see what I would do. I felt heat rush to my face. Maybe I should, I said. Maybe you'd all be happier if I wasn't here. Jake smirked. No maybe about it, he said, and then he shoved me. It wasn't a gentle push. It was the kind of hard, careless shove that sends you stumbling. My back hit the front door, and the sound made me flinch. And that's when I heard it again, clapping. Slow, sharp claps from my mother as she smiled at him like he had just said something brave instead of physically pushing a sister. Finally, someone said it, she remarked. My dad looked away, jaw tight, but he still didn't step in. In that split second, something in me just shut down. The fear, the anger, the hope that they might realize they were being cruel, it all went quiet. I straightened up, smoothed my shirt, and looked at each of them one by one. Got it, I said softly. Message received. Then I turned without another word and walked upstairs to start packing. While they stayed downstairs, already talking about me like I was a problem that had finally been solved.
I didn't slam the door when I left.
I just walked out with my backpack, my duffel, and the kind of numbness that feels heavier than any luggage. The air outside was cold enough to sting my cheeks, but it still felt softer than the way my mom had smiled at Jake while he pushed me. I loaded my stuff into my beat-up little car, sat behind the wheel for a second, and looked back at the house. No one came to the window. No one opened the door. For the first time, I let myself accept the thing I'd been afraid to admit for years. They didn't want me there, and maybe I didn't need them as much as I thought. I drove toward the city with my hands clenched around the steering wheel, headlights stretching out like a road away from everything I'd ever known. I texted my best friend Zoe on the way. Hey, can I crash at your place tonight? Long story. She replied before I hit the next stoplight. Of course, no questions asked. Just get here. When I got to her tiny apartment, she opened the door in sweatpants and messy hair, pulled me into a hug and didn't say, I told you so, even though she absolutely could have. We ordered cheap pizza. She handed me an oversized t-shirt, and I ended up curled on her couch with a blanket, my laptop on the coffee table. The corrupted file stared back at me like a reminder of everything I just walked away from. For once, though, I didn't open it. I didn't try to fix it. I just let it sit there while Zoe put on some random show and pretended not to notice when my eyes got glassy. You can stay as long as you want, she said quietly. You know that, right? I nodded because if I tried to speak, I was pretty sure my voice would crack. I fell asleep that night listening to the hum of traffic and distant sirens instead of Jake screaming at his teammates through thin walls. It was strange, but in a way it was peaceful. No one barking orders at me. No one rolling their eyes while I talked. For the first time, the silence around me didn't feel like punishment. It felt like possibility. The next morning, the sound that woke me up wasn't an alarm clock or Zoe getting ready for work. It was my phone buzzing nonstop on the coffee table. At first, I thought it was a glitch. The screen kept lighting up and going dark, lighting up again, vibrating so much it nearly slid off the edge. When I finally grabbed it, I just stared. 36 missed calls, all from 3 names: Mom, Dad, and Jake. My notifications were a mess of texts stacked on top of each other. The first ones were exactly what I expected. This is ridiculous. Emily, stop being dramatic and come home. You're scaring your mother. There was one from Jake that just said, nice job making everything about you again. I almost laughed. They had thrown me out, and somehow I was still the one causing problems by leaving. I tossed the phone aside, went to brush my teeth and splash water on my face, and tried to pretend none of it bothered me. But when I came back, there were more messages, and the tone had shifted. Emily, please pick up. This is serious. We need to talk. It's about your brother.
Call us back.
We need your help. Your help? That was new. I opened one of my mom's longer texts. eyes scanning the words faster than my brain could process them. Big trouble. Money. They're threatening legal action. We could lose everything. My heart didn't drop this time. It just paused. There was a time when a message like that would have sent me scrambling to fix everything, even if it meant draining my savings and wrecking my own plans. But now, all I could think about was how less than 12 hours earlier, those same people had watched my brother shove me into a door frame and told me nobody wanted me in that house. Now, suddenly, I was useful, a solution. I sat back on the couch, phone in my hand, Zoe watching me from the kitchen with a raised eyebrow. "Let me guess," she said. "They need something." I gave a humorless little laugh. "Yeah," I replied. "Apparently my brother's in a mess, and now I'm the emergency contact." I didn't call back. Not yet. I just stared at those 36 missed calls, at the flood of messages switching from angry to desperate, and wondered what you're supposed to do when the people who threw you out like trash suddenly act like you're the only one who can save them. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those messages before I finally hit call. Part of me wanted to block all 3 of them and go back to pretending I was just a normal college kid sleeping on a friend's couch. But curiosity and that old annoying sense of responsibility wouldn't shut up. My mom answered on the first ring like she'd been sitting there with the phone in her hand. "Emily." "Oh, thank God," she said, her voice already shaking. There was no "where are you?" or "are you okay?" Just "we're in trouble. You need to come home." I didn't say I wasn't sure this was home anymore. I just asked what happened. She didn't give me the full story over the phone, just scattered words and panicked breaths. "Your brother, money, those online loans? They're freezing accounts. There's papers from the bank. Just come here, please." She hung up before I could say yes or no. I stared at my screen for a second, then grabbed my keys. Zoe watched me from the doorway, arms crossed. "You don't owe them anything," she said quietly. I knew she was right. I went anyway. The drive back felt different this time, less like going home, and more like heading into a meeting I hadn't agreed to. The house looked the same from the outside, but there was a stack of envelopes on the porch table that hadn't been there the night before. As I walked up, I could see bold black letters through the little plastic windows. Notice. Delinquent. Final warning. My mom opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes were red. Her hair pulled back in a way that made her look smaller than I'd ever seen her. For a split second, I thought she might hug me or apologize or say anything about throwing me out. Instead, she stepped aside and said, "We need to talk in the kitchen." My dad was at the table, papers spread out everywhere. Jake sat slumped in a chair, arms folded, eyes glued to his phone like this was mildly inconvenient at best. On the table were credit card statements, emails printed out, and one envelope that said something about foreclosure in huge, impossible-to-ignore letters. My stomach twisted. "So," I said, keeping my voice as flat as I could, "what is all this?" My dad cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses the way he always does when he's uncomfortable. "Your brother made some poor decisions," he started. "We've been trying to handle it, but it's gotten out of control." My mom cut in before he could soften it too much. "He took out a few online loans for equipment," she said, her eyes flicking toward Jake. "Some under his name, some under ours. It was supposed to be temporary. He thought he could pay them back once his streaming took off." I almost laughed. "His streaming?" I repeated. "You mean the games he screams at all night with 3 viewers?" Jake glared at me, but didn't deny it.
My dead site.
"The interest rates were higher than we realized," he said. "We tried to consolidate, put some of it on the house, move things around, but now the credit cards are maxed, the loans are in default, and the bank is threatening to start foreclosure if we can't make a lump sum payment." "How much?" I asked. My mom swallowed. $15,000, she said. "To stop the legal action and get us back on a payment plan." The number hung in the air between us. $15,000. More than I'd ever seen in one place, but also close enough to what I'd saved that I instantly understood why my phone had exploded that morning. "And you called me," I said slowly, "because you want me to fix it." My mom reached across the table, palms open. "You have savings, Emily," she said. "You've been working nonstop. You told me you were doing well. If you just paid this off, We could keep the house. We'd pay you back. I laughed then, a short, sharp sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. You'd pay me back? I repeated, like Jake paid me back when he borrowed my cash for his games? Like you protected me last night when he shoved me into a door, and you clapped. My mom flinched. We were all upset, she said quickly. Things were said, but this is bigger than that. This is our home. You grew up here. Don't you care if we lose it? I looked around the kitchen. The same table where I had done homework while Jake bragged about beating some level, the same counters I had wiped 1,000 times, the same floor I had stood on the night before while my family made it clear I was disposable. I care, I said, but not enough to set myself on fire to keep you warm. My dad's face hardened. That's very dramatic, he said. We're asking you to help your family. Families support each other. I met his eyes. Did that rule apply last night? I asked. When your son shoved your daughter and your wife applauded, was that what family support looks like? Jake finally snapped. Are you seriously still crying about that? He said. I was mad. You were being insane. I didn't even push you that hard. And now you're going to let us lose the house over your hurt feelings. I turned to him. No, I said calmly. You're going to lose the house over your choices, your loans, your lies, your parents' decision to enable you. My mom's voice went high and sharp. We are trying to fix it, she said. We're asking you to be part of the solution instead of the problem. This is what family does. We stick together. I felt something settle inside me then, like a weight finally clicking into place. For years, I had swallowed everything to keep the peace. I had been the reasonable one, the understanding one, the quiet one. I was done. You only call it family when you need something, I said. The rest of the time, I'm the live-in maid and the emotional punching bag. So no, I'm not draining my savings. I'm not taking out a loan. I'm not signing anything. My mom stared at me like she didn't recognize me. You can't be serious, she whispered. If we lose this house, it's on you. No, I answered, standing up. If you lose this house, it's because you chose to clap when your son pushed me out of it instead of stopping him. Jake muttered something under his breath about me being selfish. My dad looked like he wanted to argue, but for once, he didn't have a script ready. I picked up my keys and my bag. I came because you said it was serious, I said. I listened. I understand. And I'm still saying no. I walked toward the door, feeling their stares on my back. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody called after me. Then, just as my hand closed around the doorknob, my mom's voice came out smaller than I'd ever heard it. If you walk out that door, don't expect us to forgive you, she said. I looked over my shoulder. You already made it very clear you don't want me here, I replied. This time I'm just choosing to believe you. And then I stepped outside, shut the door behind me, and left them sitting in that kitchen with their unpaid bills and their empty excuses, wondering what would hurt them more in the long run, losing the house or realizing the one person they thought would always clean up their mess had finally stopped. I wish I could say that walking out of that kitchen was the end of it, but people like my family don't let go of control that easily. The minute I got back to Zoe's place, my phone lit up again. First came the rage, long angry texts from my dad about betraying your own blood, from my mom about how I was choosing money over family, and from Jake telling me I was pathetic and that I'd regret this when we're all on the street. I muted the group thread and tried to focus on my shift schedule for the week. But it's hard to ignore your own mother typing paragraph after paragraph about what a disappointment you are. Then, like flipping a switch, the tone changed. The next day, my mom's messages were softer. We didn't mean what we said last night. We were just scared. You know we love you. My dad sent something about how he understood things have been tense and that this was our chance to come together. Jake didn't exactly apologize, but he did send, "Look, just help with this one thing, and I'll stay out of your way forever." That actually made me laugh out loud. For a while, I ignored them. I went to work, came home, ate cheap noodles with Zoe, and pretended my life was just mine. But the messages kept coming, and eventually a different thought crept in between the anger and the hurt. If they really wanted my help, if they really were that desperate, what would it look like to make them finally admit what they'd done, Not just to me, but to everyone they'd lied to about being this perfect, supportive family. So when my mom texted me again late one night, "Please, Emily, tell us what we can do to make this right," I didn't tell her to get lost. Instead, I typed back, "You want my help? Then you're going to admit what you did publicly." She replied instantly, "What do you mean?" I took a breath and let years of humiliation and dismissal pour into my fingers. "You're going to post on Facebook," I wrote, "from your account where all your friends and our relatives can see it. You're going to tell them you've been favoring Jake for years, that you let him use my money and my things, and that you stood there while he shoved me out of the house and told me no one wanted me there. You're going to apologize to me by name, not in private, not in a text, publicly." The typing bubble flashed on and off for a long time. When her reply finally came, it was just 3 words. "That's not fair." I shrugged, even though she couldn't see me. "Neither is asking your daughter to erase $15,000 of your mistakes," I sent back. Then I put my phone face down and went to bed. The next afternoon, Zoe walked into the living room holding her phone. You've seen this?" she asked. I hadn't. She handed it to me. It was my mom's Facebook page. Front and center was a long post already stacked with comments. She had done it. She didn't word it exactly the way I asked. She softened where she could and framed some things as misunderstandings. But it was all there. The favoritism, the stolen money, the night Jake pushed me and she clapped. The sentence, "I was wrong and I hurt my daughter," Emily, sat in the middle of the post like a spotlight. People were shocked. Some commented things like, "I had no idea," and "That must have been so painful for her." A few tried to defend my parents, but others clearly weren't letting it slide. Family members started tagging me, asking if I was okay. Messages from cousins I barely spoke to popped up in my inbox, saying they believed me and that they were sorry. My mom texted me a screenshot of her own post, like proof. "There," she wrote. "We did what you asked. Now, will you help us keep the house?" I stared at that message for a long time. I thought about the little girl version of me who would have done anything, paid anything, to finally be chosen. I thought about the way my chest had felt hollow when she clapped as her son shoved me into a door. And then I thought about the version of me who had slept on a friend's couch and still felt more at peace than in that big, pretty suburban house. "I believe you're sorry," I typed back. "And I accept your apology, but I'm still not giving you my savings. I'm not going to fix this for you." There was a long pause. Then my dad's number popped up on my screen, calling. I let it ring out. Another text arrived. "You're being cruel." I replied with one sentence that I meant more than anything I'd ever said to them. Facing consequences isn't cruelty. After that, things moved faster than even I expected. The bank didn't care about Facebook posts or family drama. The notices turned into final notices. And then my parents had a move-out date. They tried to sell what they could, furniture, electronics, that shiny gaming setup they'd gone into debt for in the first place. It wasn't enough. Jake lost his part-time job when the company ran a background check and saw the mess on his credit and the lawsuits attached to his name. The neighbors noticed the for sale sign, then the moving truck. My mom's posts shifted from humble brags about her amazing son to vague quotes about being betrayed by the ones you love. But the people who had seen her confession didn't forget. Some unfriended her. Others stopped responding. The perfect image she'd curated for years cracked right in front of her. And this time, there was no one left to glue it back together for her. I watched it all from a distance through screenshots and secondhand updates, with this strange mix of satisfaction and sadness twisting in my chest. I hadn't lifted a finger to ruin their lives. I just stopped cleaning up their mess. And somehow that was enough to let everything they'd built on lies and favoritism collapse under its own weight. If you were in my shoes, would you have stepped in at the last minute to save them? Or would you have let them finally feel what it's like to live with the consequences of their own choices the way I did? 6 months later, I sometimes catch myself thinking about that night in the hallway, and it feels like I'm remembering a scene from someone else's life, like a movie I watched a long time ago. My mom clapping while my brother shoved me toward the door used to replay in my head on a loop, keeping me up at night. Now, most nights, I fall asleep in a tiny one-bedroom apartment that is completely mine, with my own thrifted furniture, my own mismatched mugs, and my laptop on a desk that nobody touches but me. I still work at the coffee shop, but only part-time now because the rest of my schedule is filled with freelance design work and an internship I landed with a small marketing agency downtown. The scholarship I was trying to apply for that night, I redid the project from scratch on a borrowed laptop at Zoe's place and ended up winning a smaller grant than I hoped for, but enough to prove to myself that I didn't need anyone's permission to move forward. My parents and I talk sometimes, but it's not the way it used to be. My mom sends long texts about how hard things have been in their new apartment, how she misses the old house, how she wishes we could go back to before everything fell apart. My dad has sent a few awkward apology messages, the kind that take responsibility in vague, half-finished sentences. Jake hasn't apologized.
Not really.
He sent one short text months ago that said, "I shouldn't have pushed you," and then followed it up with, "But you didn't have to let them take the house." I didn't respond to that part. I'm not holding out for some big tearful reunion or a perfect Hollywood ending. The truth is, I don't need them to fully understand what they did. I just need them to know that I won't stand in the line of fire for them anymore. The anger I carried for so long has mostly burned out. And what's left is something quieter, a kind of sad clarity and a stubborn kind of peace. I don't feel guilty for not saving them. They had chances, years of chances, to treat me like a daughter instead of a backup plan. They chose not to, and life finally answered them back. If there's any lesson in all of this, it's that blood doesn't give anyone the right to break you and then demand you be the one to fix what they shattered. Sometimes the bravest, kindest thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from the people who keep proving they don't value you, even if those people share your last name. So yes, my mom once clapped while my brother shoved me out of the house. And now I'm the one sleeping peacefully at night, building a life they don't get to control. If you were me, would you forgive them and let them back in? Or would you keep your distance the way I have? And have you ever had to choose your own self-respect over keeping the peace with family?